Okay, welcome everyone to, oh, real quick, I need to record this session. It is being recorded. Okay, welcome everyone to the career panel. So, this event is an opportunity for all of you in the NeuroHackademy to ask questions about the career progression of a few of our panelists here. And in a second, I'm going to ask all of the panelists to introduce themselves. But the format here is going to be very simple. We may provide a couple introductory questions, but really this is an opportunity for you all to ask questions of our panelists. Normally, every year in the past, I've had a microphone that I could bring around to you all. Apparently the microphone is broken this year, so we don't have a microphone. You're going to have to talk pretty loud, especially if you're in the back, if you have a question. We'll do our best to make sure if people on Zoom can't hear, please let us know. We can hear you, at least we can hear you through the owl, so that should be fine. But basically, talk loud. Okay, so just to start things off, I'm just going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and just tell us in 30 seconds or a minute or so what your career trajectory has been so far and where you are in academia, industry, or a combination of the two, and just let everyone know who you are. You can start, Kelly. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to project my voice. Some of you have met me before already from the NeuroHack, but hi, my name is Kelly Chang. I'm a research scientist. I work with NOAA on visual cortex and retinopathy. My career trajectory has been primarily academic. My path, I wouldn't say, is completely the traditional route. I graduated with my PhD. I went to do a postdoctoral position, and then I ended up as a research scientist still here at the University of Washington.
So hi everyone, I think I already present myself. I'm on my talk. So I'm Serge Coudreau, research software engineer. Is a bit less traditional. So I got a master in computer vision. After that, I worked 1 year in the industry. I went then to the academia as a research software engineer. So I don't have a PhD, and then I moved to US doing that. So yeah.
Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Don Setiawan. I am not in any of the neuro field, but I am a research software engineer with the eScience Institute Scientific Software Engineering Center, where we actually help researchers build software and things like that across many, many different domains. And my career trajectory has been, I've been in the academia, I've been actually at the University of Washington for about 10 years or so, basically building my career in the research software engineering realm, mostly in the sort of more geospatial and environmental type of domain. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Fang. I am a clinical psychologist by training. So I got a PhD in clinical psychology. And so I also practice, and I've been licensed in 2 states, in Massachusetts and Washington. I obtained my training in neuroimaging through a K award at the Martino Center in Boston and Mass General Hospital, where I was working in the OCD program for many years. And then I decided to go full on into academia, got an R1 position here in the Department of Psychology. So I consider myself a translational scientist. Also happy to talk about having 3 kids in academia. So I just got tenure a couple years ago. And it's kind of been an interesting journey. So thanks for having me.
Okay, so if nobody asks any questions, this is going to get real awkward, but at this point, and I see some questions already, so I'm walking towards you because I'm used to bringing a microphone over, but that's so please just ask your question.
I was curious what the difference between being a postdoc and a research scientist is. For example, do you belong to a lab? Do you have a PI, or you're kind of doing your own thing?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. For people on Zoom, the question was like, what's the difference between a postdoc position and a research scientist position? So here, at least my understanding of it is US system based. So apologies to other countries if they have different workarounds about this. But here in the US, postdoc and a research scientist, at least, let's say 3 years into it, we do about the same thing in terms of research, being a part of a lab, if you're associated with some sort of grant or something like that. The difference is that there's a time limit with a postdoctoral position, especially here at the university. After, I believe, about 5 years, and if anyone else knows more, correct me, but about 5 years, that position can and will be terminated. essentially. And a research scientist, the position itself is not tied to that kind of time limit. The implication is that postdocs are on the job, like advancing to become on the job market, to become a professor at a later stage. And so it's not a forever position. And so my choice of choosing the research scientist title was my way of trying not to have an axe over my head and being like, all right, in 5 years, you have made enough papers, written enough stuff to get out and go. And I didn't know if I wanted to be a PI when I originally started. So I, made that decision pretty early on.
And apologies, I didn't make this clear at the beginning, but not every question is going to be for every panelist, and that's fine. Answer the questions you think you can answer. Yeah.
A follow-up question.
Go ahead.
Do you need would you need a postdoc to become a research scientist? And how is that pay compared to this?
Following up on that, again, my knowledge is based off of here, but I believe most universities have a similar system where research scientists are also graded in terms of like literally there's like research scientist 1, research scientist 2, like arbitrary number system, but they do go up in hierarchy. So like my understanding is research scientist 2 can be people with bachelor's degrees, potentially master's degrees, but research scientists 3 to 4 require a PhD. But that might depend on your institution, like what level that grade will change. Yes, there's also a salary difference, but that's something to also negotiate. There's a range within the particular grade as well.
Anything to know about that?
Oh yeah.
Well, so principal research scientist is kind of like the highest level you could be, basically. This institution, something to ask if you're interested in that pathway, though, in this very little by institution, is whether you have PI status or not. And PI status usually basically means you can apply for grants yourself. That does vary by institution. I'll just call out Stanford, but Stanford, for example, does not allow research scientists to be PIs. So you hear only tenure track faculty there that can basically find a grant. So that's something to think about in terms of that career path. Here, in most places, you can be an investigator and have your grants and research scientist technical position in some places all you can. And that's a big difference based on institution.
And just for context, I'm also a research scientist at the University of Washington, so it's a rather broad title that can encompass a lot of jobs. And at least in some places, the difference between a postdoc and a research scientist is sometimes just how much the PI is willing to pay the person, or whether they've been around for a service of like 5 years or more.
And I want to add also, as a research software engineer, I also apply for grant. So my salary depends on only on grant. So same, I don't. My PI, I have only one supervisor, the professor, who apply for grant for me, but also I have to do it for myself to complement my salary. So I'm tied to someone, but at the same time, I'm completely independent. So it's a bit special as a status.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering, what's the difference between like a principal research scientist or like a higher level research scientist and a DSPI, like PI is not your, well, like PI with tenure track faculty. Sorry, is that?
Yeah, and let me repeat it for Zoom here. If I heard you right, what's the difference between being a research scientist with PI status versus someone on the tenure track?
Can I speak
Go
on
ahead,
that?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you heard already the research scientist position is really, really broad. And the R1 kind of academia track, tenure track is a little more homogeneous. It differs a little bit in terms of the criteria for promotion across disciplines. So if I'm in psychology, that's going to be evaluated differently than in the Department of Psychiatry, for example. But in general, it's a little more predictable. You're on a tenure clock, you've got about 6 years to kind of make it to the next stage. Generally, the criteria are pretty clear cut. It's kind of what everyone kind of knows, or in terms of the tenure track, there's certain publications that you need to produce in high quality journals, things like that. And then you're responsible for the kind of health of your entire lab, which some research scientists, I guess, if you don't have PI status, you're not really worried about funding all of the research tasks in your lab either. Does that make sense? So you're thinking also about bigger picture, like budgetary things, not just for your project that you're PI on.
So the research scientists that do not have a PI status,
do you get to work with PhD students? Like what would you do with the funding? Like, would you just work on the projects on your own, or would you have PhD students or masters or other than the students who work with it for you?
Without without the actual status, and just again, to be clear about PI status, depending on institution, there's a difference between what our NIH says is PI status versus what you may also colloquially know as a PI. Just to make that clear, those are two different things. PI status literally just means, can I be the principal investigator on a grant that I can submit and I'm in charge of? PI that you more colloquially know is just professor in that kind of sense. So PI status for grant work, that's really what we're referring to. And so if you don't have PI status as a research scientist, you cannot apply for grants without permission from your department or whoever houses you at your institution. And sometimes that allowance is tolerable, like you can ask for permission, and sometimes it's a hard no. So that also depends on where you are. And then you are tied to whatever funding source pays your money, pays your stipend essentially. So if it comes from a professor and they hire you as a research scientist, you're tied to them. If they have a lab ecosystem, then you're in that lab ecosystem. If it's some other institute at a more higher level, then they pay for you potentially like staff. And so you may be in their ecosystem, or you may be a solo person sort of freelancing it. It's not in the same way, but like if you sort of work on one project by yourself kind of thing. So it can vary wildly.
Related to that, maybe briefly, is that there's research scientists, there's also research faculty, and depending on the institution, those things can be similar or almost the same thing. And it's really institution dependent, so there's, you see research professor sometimes, that's usually also different from someone like Angela, who's the tenure track professor. And research professors are usually on a contract basis, kind of, where actually research scientists would be apart. So there's a lot of individual variability in different institutions.
Okay, I think, is this working? No. Oh, testing,
Oh.
testing.
Oh.
Testing, no. I guess we don't have a mic, so we're managing. I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
So if you're a research scientist with a PI status, do you have to teach a course, or that's not necessarily a requirement, and you just have to lead a lab and get PhD students to research?
So as someone who's in that position, I actually have PI status, depending on, so I can submit my own grants as well. I don't have students, so that's not a requirement. Typically, research scientists, I don't think they have students.
That varies a lot also by university. So here at the University of Washington, as a research scientist, I'm not allowed to chair a committee, but I can sit on a committee as a committee member. And that was actually, I believe, negotiated by the union here, because they didn't want students to be on non-professor, kind of sensible. But regardless, this will depend a lot.
Yeah, so like, and I also don't teach courses, but Noah teaches different kinds of like workshops. So there's, yeah, like this. And I was trained in a traditional PhD program, so I also teach quite a bit in my own personal life. But it's like, it depends. It really depends. You think of it more as like, you do research, everything else depends on where you are, who you're with, what money is funding you, right? If it's a traditional research grant where you do more research, or maybe a teaching grant, or it might be administratively organizing something like this. Right, so it can vary quite a bit.
So I'm supposed to be just in the audience, but I am a research scientist also, and with PI status, but I'm not writing grants. And partly is because I'm looking for 4 labs. So I'm wondering what you think about this diversification of like effort that sometimes the research scientist experiences.
It's more like I'm predominating the conversation. I don't want to do that. I'm aware. I would like to open the floor.
Well, I don't know about the research scientist piece, but I'm part of, as I mentioned, the Scientific Software Engineering Center, where for me as a research software engineer, I don't have to write grants, unlike what's her name again? Serge. Sorry, unlike Serge, And for me, again, it's like I think we have this sort of a head of engineer that is and leadership that is going out there and trying to get grants so that we can support different research. And right now we're actually part of 4 centers, which is Johns Hopkins, and we have the University of Washington, Georgia Tech, and University of Cambridge. And we get basically projects that are like, hey, I need your help to optimize software, whether that's any sort of domain. And then we get those, and then we work on those within the 6-month time frame. So I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with sort of this research software engineering track. It's more like, okay, yeah, you might get a PhD in some sort of neuro domain, but then you get more interest in like, I'm actually more interested in creating the technology to do the research. And that is potentially a track that you might be able to go, that is just sort of a little bit different than research scientist track. But it's definitely also still rewarding, and labs and things like that can give you that stability without having to worry about writing your own, like writing grants and proposals and doing proposals and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a whole, actually, just shout out, there's actually a whole organization that's USRSE. I think I mentioned that to one of you today, that definitely check that out and join, and join the community and get to know about this track. And yeah, I don't know.
I have a follow-up about that.
Sure.
Do you find that is more easy to transfer to like industry, since you're not so tied to like a position, like a research position?
Yeah, so the question is, do I find that transferable to industry? And yes, that's definitely so. A lot of the skills are just a lot of software engineering skills that you're developing and you're getting better at, making code running more performant, figuring out how to deploy processing pipelines, and then also just like modularizing code and creating a way to reproducibility software, things like that. Those definitely transfer to industry. And actually, our center, we hire a lot of our like my team members, a lot of them come from industry, from like Microsoft, AWS, and stuff like that, because they're going the other way, where they're like, I want to do more of a fulfilling work rather than just like, creating ads, software to do ads and stuff like that. So they're coming there. But, a lot of the skills that you're learning as you're working with researchers and making sure that science, advancing science, stuff like that, that can definitely go port over. And now, because of this well-known organization, such as the US RSC, now we're actually getting recognition from the industry of like, oh, this is a legit career path, and whatever you're learning, like you're solving really hard problems here in science, and that knowledge definitely is like really key, especially now in the age of AI. There is that basically the ability to bridge the gap between science communication and this more technology communication is ever more important in the age of AI, because that is your domain knowledge, and that is the thing that you can really like, you can be in here but not knowing the domain, and that can like sort of just pigeonhole you to just thinking about that piece and not being able to communicate with other people for any business needs or any research needs. So I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah, and to emphasize what he said about the recognition, now, it's very common in Europe, and we start also in US. You can, because many research software engineers have a master, but actually you can get a PhD by recognition, meaning that after working 3, 4, 5, 6 years, you can apply to usually is European university, but it starts arriving in US, where many people include you in papers. So you just compile the number of papers where you are at, okay, and also you show your work in open source, how you help big libraries with your contribution, and by doing this compilation of 3, 4, 5 years of work, you can be recognized and get your PhD just by that. So this field really start to be recognized in general. So if you don't want to do a PhD the traditional way, this is a way also to do it. You just need to find so you can always jump to academia or jump back to industry if you are tired of academia.
Yes, exactly.
If you want a big salary.
Yeah, to that point
So-
about like papers, right? I mean, I don't write my own papers oftentimes, but I co-author in like 10 or more papers. And so I have this pool of papers under my name, and I'm just contributing to the software that, allowing the science. And really, I can get a PhD, like you say, if I really want. I already have this pool of papers. So yeah.
So I actually think we're talking, we'll go back to everyone's question in just a second, but I think we're kind of, we've talked around the edge of an issue, and I think maybe we could just address it. So I'm wondering if each of you could go along and say, you told us what your position is, but where does the money that pays your salary come from? And what is success in your position look like? Like, what is the metric of success for your position? Maybe we can start that one.
Sure, yeah, I think someone asked a teaching question, and that for me triggered this fundamental difference in the position based on where the money comes from. And if you've heard of jobs like soft money and hard money, have you guys heard of those terms? Those are major things that drive decisions about career, if you ask me, and has driven my career. So I'll just say that that's a term I'll use. Psychology department funding for tenure track positions or any department in a College of Arts and Sciences comes from tuition from undergrads. So now I'm on a 9-month contract from autumn, winter, spring. Summers I pay myself, but I'm guaranteed to be paid in my salary regardless of my grant funding. And if I get grants, which I should be because I'm a tenure track faculty, I get supplemental income in the summer to support my summer salary. And then I could also just not teach during the year and buy out of my teaching requirement. So it's kind of like a bonus. Where I was at Mass General in a psychiatry department, I was all soft money. So someone asked about diversifying your role. I was 20% split 5 ways, which if you ask me, was extremely stressful as a postdoc. And I was actually working way over 100% effort because people think you're just talking about direct hours, and it never works out like that. So I felt extremely stretched thin in that setup, and why I pursued a K award probably earlier than most people, because I got my K award funded in my first year of postdoc. So that had a lot of implications in terms of where I wanted to go because of how I was funded. So now my life is pretty secure because I got the tenure, I got this position. No one could technically fire me, but I have to say I'm not in this for the money because I'm getting paid a fraction of what my friends are getting paid in industry. And there's positions in industry where my friends have gone on to run clinical programs where they're getting $350 a year. So they're getting paid way more. So it's just different trade-offs. So to answer Noah's question here, I guess just to set that up, you wanted me to go through like where I was paid each way?
What is your salary and what's the metric of success in your position?
Yeah, okay, so now I'm paid by undergrads coming to UW, even though have I taught a single I've probably taught like 5 undergrads. I know, so thank you to them, but it's because I teach undergrad teaching requirement for tenure, but the way I skirted that is because they needed me to teach core courses in the PhD program. Most faculty do have to teach large undergrad prep courses like abnormal or Psych 101 or something like that. So that's very unusual for me. I'll have to say that. So my money comes from undergrads right now, but I'm only paid 9 months. So the number on the contract looks abysmal because you have to times it by the summer salary that I support myself with. And I could teach in the summer and supplement that way. The metric for success are what people might think of traditional measures of academia success, what I mentioned already in terms of publications, grant dollars. And the reason why grant dollars are so beneficial to an R1 university, just to tell you how the money works out, is because there's indirect costs that are negotiated for every institution. And those indirect costs pay the building lights, the salary benefits for all of your staff or for yourself, all of those indirects are what the current administration is trying to cut in terms of what supports research, right? And our indirects here at UW are 55.5%. So for every dollar that comes for supporting research, we also budget 55.5% for these indirect costs. And those indirect costs, the more you get of those for your grants, those come to a department to support startup salaries, startup funds. If you negotiate startups for a job, the more grants that come to a department, the more rich they are with these startups, and they can attract really good talent because they can offer you some insane startup packages. So the really wealthy institutions, our ones, have really nice startup packages because it comes from these indirect costs. So those are other things about money that I think are really important to understand in terms of what drives your salary.
And say if people want to have a breakout session about how money works in academia, sometime that would be something. But
Do you have a question?
Yeah, a quick follow-up question for that. So you mentioned the nicer things about, yeah, I need to talk about it. You mentioned the nicer things about having more money due to more indirect costs, but doesn't that mean also from the other side, the candidates which can come to that department have to be really, really good? So it works, I guess, both ways, right? So
Sure. Yeah, it
Very
becomes
true.
very competitive to get
Yeah.
those jobs. Yeah, you know.
Yeah. Let's see. For me, I think the center itself was started from a gift from the Virtual Institute for Scientific Software by Schmidt Sciences. So that's where the big chunk of money that we got from. And this is where we were able to sort of serve their scientists that are part of their pool of researchers for like 5 years. So essentially, when I joined back in 2023, I'm secured for 5 years. Obviously, I'm still in academia, so it's still sort of soft money. So like right now, our gift is supposed to end in like 2028. So our leadership is working on trying to foster collaborations among different research groups within the UW, and so that we are starting now to get written into grants, basically a chunk of whatever research that they get. The research money, we're part of that chunk. So that feeds the salary for me and also my team. We're a pretty small team of like 5. And yeah, each of us has, I know one of the competitiveness of the center originally was that we're trying to match almost to industry salary. And so we can get some talents from industry. And so as I mentioned, like my other colleagues are all coming from industries because we're very competitive in that regards. So those were kind of where the money from for my center comes from. And the metrics of success, we do run our research software engineering shop kind of almost true to industry. So the metrics of success is deliverables, right? To make sure that whatever you promise the researchers you're able to deliver. So we initially really heavily scope of okay, what can we get done in 6 months and so on, and what can we deliver? And then we make sure that we can deliver that within the time frame, and as well as also help them run a workshop for that particular software. So that's one of the things that we get to do. And if we can get a paper out of it, so we do tell them, be like, hey, if you need some help to write a paper, then we can help you write a paper as well. And so that's part of our deliverable that we need to achieve. And from that, it helps because on the other side, they're required to make sure that we're co-author. So again, going back to the whole the reason I have probably 10 or so paper under my name, even though I'm not by any means a researcher, is because of that requirement and part of that deliverables that we do as a research software engineer. And yeah, those are the answers.
Yeah, concerning my case, so when I was back in Europe, in Paris, actually, in a research lab, my salary was a bit like you, hard money, meaning that I couldn't be fired. Everything was, I mean, it's normal salary, normal job, nothing particular. I didn't have to write grant. Was very just do my job, and metrics of success is like you just said, deliverable. Then I moved to US, and when I moved to US, I have two situations. The first one was to move, so I had to make a choice back then. The first one was to go to a business school because my wife is a professor in a business school. So here it is. I don't want to call it hard money, but it was looking like that because like you get money of all the MBA students who are super rich. So so many MBA school business school are very rich. It's impressive. Or going to neuroscience, and here was 100% soft money, and I choose the soft money. Doesn't make sense, but I prefer neuroscience field. Yeah. So now I'm 100% of soft money. So if there is no grant, I don't have a job anymore. So my colleague write grant where he put me. I write grant, and some collaborators sometimes write grant to include me on a project, but I have 100% on soft money, meaning that when grant disappear, I have the university will try for 6 months to keep me to see if they find a solution, and if there is no solution, I'm out of the job. So personally, I'm not. It's not a stress for me because of my status of software engineer. I know that I can move to industry very easily, better salary, so I'm completely fine with this status. But I know that some people don't like it at all. Me, I choose it, so I'm okay with it.
I'm actually probably in a situation that very similar to yours, 100% soft money. Probably also the measures of success are a little bit more familiar to people here, where it's papers, conference publications, abstracts, software packages actually now, because a little bit more of the software engineering and data science side of things. So my worldview and the way that I get funded probably seems very familiar, especially at this postdoctoral / research scientist level, right after your PhD. I think where I differ, and that might be something that you consider, and someone else who's mentioned it in the audience, where it's like, I think of my life in terms of FTE. Basically, what constitutes a full-time position or full-time employment is 100%. Thankfully, that number is nice, big, and round. And then from there, it can be supplemented a bazillion kinds of ways. So if I'm willing to work for a separate lab who needs my help to do some processing on something I'm an expert at, 10%. Okay, cool. That's 90% covered by something else, 10% there. That's 5 hours out of my week. Great. All right, the center that some of the people went on the tour with, great. That can cover me if I work as an operator, 15%. All right, cool. 25% covered, 25%, right? The math is mathing, the number is numbering. But essentially, it is what it is, right? In this kind of day and age, I felt like putting all of my eggs in one basket felt like a stupid decision. And that diversifying not just my research skills, but also my ability to do other kinds of work, maintains my ability to, if you look at me as a whole package, if I wanted to objectify myself in that way, makes it feel like I am a harder person to fire, just generally speaking in terms of strategy. So, right, of course, would I want to sit in my little cave every day and code for 8 hours? Of course I would. Would I want to never talk to a person ever again? Also, of course I would. But, of course, but this is not the life that we work in, and this is not the current environment that funds our research, that drives our interesting questions, and also like teach interesting people cool things. You make it work, right? And there was one thing I was taught back when I admired someone who was in a very similar position as I was, back when I was a graduate student. they basically wrote the job for this person. Like they basically needed a radiologist who could make head coils at a different center that I was also working at. That person had such a select and fine niche set of skills that only he could provide. And so they were like, we're going to write and make a job for this one human. And that person's been there for over 20 years now. And they will never lose him because he is protected like a child in a bubble. Like he is so invaluable that, what was it? The bus factor? It's like if basically the bus took him out, it's over. So yeah, so the whole entire place would collapse. So I've aimed my entire career to go towards that direction because I'm 100% soft money. There's no stability in that outside of the skills that you can harvest yourself or you can develop yourself. And so that's sort of been my strategy through it. But the deliverables or the success measures are still the same. And I just happen to like that.
I have a question from Slack,
Oh,
which will take you in a slightly different direction here. Have you felt constrained by the methods that you used in your graduate program, or have you been able to branch out relatively easily? For example, if you used one neuroimaging technique while getting your PhD, did you find it difficult to obtain a postdoc or to pursue independent research using a different neuroimaging modality? I think Kelly's well equipped to answer that one, I think.
So more backstory. You're getting to know me very well. My graduate school, in my undergraduate, I studied psychophysics. And then in my graduate school, I studied functional neuroimaging. And then in my postdoctoral work with Ariel, that's why he knows this, I studied diffusion imaging as well. And you might think that all of these imaging modalities or these different kinds of behavioral metrics or like, right, these things, they differ and you need a wide variety of skills. Yes, that's true, but there's way more commonality than you think. It's all big data. If you know how to stay organized, if you know how to, if you're from psychology like I am, you know how to run a research study, you know how to recruit people, you know how to train RAs to do the things for you, you know how to set up pipelines. All of these things are generalizable, so long as you think they are. The inflexibility is like learning the new topic, but a lot of us got into this particular kind of program for being really good at studying. I don't think that's the limitation here. It's just the amount of time and effort you're willing to put into making your skills that you already have into something that might look a little bit different on the outset, but really it comes from the same fundamental place, I feel. So I didn't find it difficult at all. If anything, I felt like after going to diffusion for the postdoctoral work, if it took 5 years to learn how to do functional imaging really well, it took about like 1 year to learn how to do diffusion really well because it was transferable in that way.
Just want to answer that question. Okay, another question. Oh, lots of go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it was mentioned moving from Europe to the US.
Yeah.
And I'm European, so I'm a bit curious, just considering doing a PhD in the US later on. And my background is clinical psychology. So my question is quite open and broad, but it's just, do you have a piece of information for me? Anything unspoken or something I won't find online?
About what?
About being European in the US, doing research here. Just as I said, I'm considering future here. So I don't know. Do what you do with that question.
This is a good moment to remind everyone that this is being recorded and will get posted on YouTube.
so now it will be spoken and ingested by AI.
And can I say Joker?
Yeah.
Yeah. I say Joker next. No, I don't know. Differences? Pace of work. That's a reality. The pace of work is very different. This surprises me a lot. But not in bad or good or bad. I mean, it's just very different, the pace that you can have in Europe and here. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how to explain it. How here people are very passionate by what they are doing. and they can be very extreme on their research and everything, which is something that I love, but at the same time, it's something that I hate, because in Europe, people were passionate, but a break is a break, you know. It's no, but it's really yeah, it's just a different pace of life, and you need to see if you like this pace of life or not. This is me, for example, I don't see myself coming back in Europe for working. I prefer this pace of life here. Even if I want to go back in Europe to live, I prefer the way we live in Europe. There is no question. I prefer so much how we live in Europe. But for working, which is, when you think about it, is a bunch of time of your life, the pace here is amazing. I'm learning so much. People are very passionate. So, yeah, it depends of everyone, I think. Really, I don't have any, yeah.
No, thank you.
I think I could take a stab at that question too, and happy to talk more separately. You can answer it from the cultural perspective, just in terms of like day to day, but in the US, at least in academia, you're really following compliance that's really set top down from NIH, especially because large labs in the US are funded mostly by NIH. They set some insane regulatory requirements, and if you do a good job of running your lab, you have to follow those regulatory requirements. I also conduct FDA regulated research, a lot of regulation around that. So you are training your staff very closely. And then also just with the current administration policies, international students and international collaborations have really come down hard. And so it's going to be very difficult to find positions unless you can bring in your own funding. And then the last thing I'll say is that clinical training in Europe is very different than clinical training in the US. It's much broader, lower gateways. And so you want to find very good match in terms of what your skill sets are and what your research plan is going to be. It's very easy for people in the US to get clinical training too. And so if that's your only pursuit without research, you know, there's opportunities for that. But if you're getting a PhD, you really need to provide a convincing rationale for research studies and what your plan for study would be. Yeah.
And I think it's true that PhD is not as much, but with faculty and other positions in maybe comment, is that the salaries here are pretty different, especially like the US compared to the UK, but also I think continental Europe, the US is significantly higher than you'll find in Europe.
And also, I want to add also the progression, how to say, in a career. I feel here you have more option and possibility to climb in a ladder and do whatever you really want. In Europe, it's very hard to find a position. And when you got this position, it's even harder to change your label, I mean, say, see, and to climb and to do something else or to collaborate. You are really in a close days, and so
people are like more laid back, like they don't want to do anything but in Europe, like if they are setting in one platform, they don't want to even go for a higher raise for like even for $200 or something. They're like,
it's true, but I know many researchers who want to push really. They have a good position and they want to go higher and to make more research, and they were kind of blocked by the system. And actually now they gave up and they try to just, so it's not naturally that they wanted to be laid down. You know that they were hungry, they wanted to push their research, and they didn't have enough funding or enough collaboration. Everything was slowing down, and because of that, they kind of give up and take the. So this is a huge difference also that you can see.
I have a question for Angela. I was wondering if you do clinical work as a faculty now, and what motivated your decision around that? And I also am curious about being a mom. How do you manage that?
Yeah. I came from a psychiatry department. John and I talk about this a lot. In that department, when I say soft money, it means you're funded totally on grants, right? don't get me wrong, I didn't move to hard money because I don't like writing grants. I love writing grants. What I saw though was in a more constrained grant funding environment, how people were really just trying to get money. And they were sacrificing their real research interests. They were sacrificing, they were really, the staff were stressed also about whether they could keep their jobs. And it was kind of creating more stress than I care for. So I moved to hard money for that, knowing I wanted to start a family also. But yeah, it's been, so the first question is about moving from,
You're doing clinical.
Yeah.
Seeing patients.
yeah, I do still see patients. I try to keep it minimal. I found out in grad school 1 week when I was maybe seeing 30 direct service hours in 1 week that this was not for me.
Yeah.
Even though that might have been part of my original intention for pursuing the PhD, you need to make a convincing argument that you want to study research when you get a PhD. But and they always tell you when you go on interviews, don't say you want to practice, which I didn't want to set up a practice, but a lot of my friends who ended up with PhDs in clinical psych end up doing that as a fallback. So, and it's always nice to diversify your job, make yourself, flexible. And so as soon as I got my PhD, I set up a shingle and I was like, I'm going to do private practice for 4 hours a week. And I was in debt so much from undergrad. I'm a first generation immigrant I was born in Taiwan. So I came here, had tons of loans, did not know what a PhD was, didn't know, didn't know what mental health was. So I ended up getting the NIH to pay for a lot of my undergrad loans with the loan repayment program. But I set up a shingle. I charged $200 an hour for a session, as you can when you first get your PhD. And I made a lot of money that way just to make up for the 401k I was not earning in my PhD. And so I still see one patient a week, and that's probably because my research has a very strong applied focus, which is why I came from psychiatry, really interested in improving the mental health and treatments of my patients. So what I loved about psychiatry was how much the research was tied to the clinical care. And so we're really trying to better develop treatments for people with anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorders. And so I specialize in cognitive behavior therapy, and I have a grant to understand the neurobiology of CBT response. So yeah, I still see one person a week, and then I supervise like an army of grad students who are trying to get trained. Oh, some of the cases are such like tough cases, but I try to take only cases that are complex and like, you know, need specialty, a psychologist to see. And then the mom thing, I feel like I can talk forever about. Every day I'm at work and I can be there is a win. I was just at soccer practice this morning and then it was rained out and they still played. I'm like, okay. I feel like different from Boston where you stop everything if it's raining, So yeah, I'm happy to talk about, I needed fertility treatment for all 3 kids. So talk about like a timeline that's unpredictable. But yeah, it's doable. You just really, it's such a privileged position for me to be paid for my ideas. That's so amazing in science that, I think so much about my friends in industry who are getting paid more, but then their lives are like insane. They're just like, and they're applying for like jobs all the time. And I'm an ox in my birth year is the year of the ox. And I always knew I was very steady and I needed to be like consistent and stable. I was always ready at 7 in the morning for school. I had my backpack ready. I'm someone who needs that stability. And so I just couldn't live off of the stress of like applying for multiple jobs, having my CV always up and down. So it's just a personality.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a follow-up to that. I was wondering if you could speak a little more about your experience actually like forming your family, and decisions that went into maybe like when to start a family, considering like the PhD is very intensive. This is a time where often other folks our age are starting to have families. Women on average start their families much later than men. So yeah, I was wondering if you could expand on that a bit.
Yeah, they say the K award is a baby award. Anyone heard of that?
Yeah.
My PI told me you should have more babies now if you want more. And so I was like, I would if I could get my uterus to cooperate, but I can't. You know, like you just can't predict. And women in my cohort were having kids later and later because they were focusing on their careers. So the K ward though is an amazing mechanism, whether it's any of the K mechanisms, especially if it's 5 years. I was at a turning point looking at a F32 or a T32 versus a K. That's a decision some of you might be looking at soon. And I have to say the NIH caps those F32s at like 50,000 a year. It might be like 55,000 now a year, which I saw as a huge limitation to like, okay, I have my PhD now. I sacrificed years. I could have been working at McKinsey, like my other friends, making so much more money and earning retirement money, you know? And so thinking practically like that, just again, first generation stuff, I was just like, I'm not going for the F32. But then did I have any templates of people first year in their postdoc getting in K? No. So I took a huge risk. And to my surprise, the studies section reviewed my application very favorably because they saw me as so early. I was being compared to people 8 years out, but they saw me as really early and compared me to people at my level, like fresh out of my PhD. And that worked out really well in my favor. So I think I now never recommend my mentees to apply for the F32 because it keeps you locked in. And then if you're not productive on that study, you get blacklisted for the K. And they see that once you're in the NIH system, they want to see a progression of productivity and you're evaluated to that benchmark. So I just say go for the K and get really good mentors who can support you on the K if you're interested in that academic track.
What's the monetary difference between the K and the?
I started at 90,000 a year on the K award, and now it's bumped up to 100K a year. And since then, it might have even increased a little bit more. I'm not sure. But the F32 is like 55,000 a year.
Which K are you talking about? Is it the K99 or is it?
I think all Ks are somewhat around the same level.
No, K99 is lower cutoffs.
Oh, really?
For salary, yeah. The overall amount is 100K.
Okay.
The research salary is less. It's capped at 75K.
Oh, which K is 75?
K99, the standard for most non-immigrants can only do the K99. So
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay.
unlike the K12 or the others,
Yeah.
which immigrants and
That's-
green card holders can do.
It's still substantial from 55,000 a year.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I wanted to add also for kids, I see for my wife, when you are in the tenure clock, because we start kid when she was on the tenure, I don't want to say mistake, but for every kid, you have a tenure, 1 year tenure extension in our program. So they kind of help you. You are not at the same tenure clock of 5 years. When we got the first kid, it was 6 years. Second kid, 1 year more to help you to handle your research and to have a bit less pressure, which is great because giving life is hard, especially for women.
But France allows like a 1-year maternity leave.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about US,
Yeah.
not in France. In France, no, no. I don't want to talk about this. It's completely different. But yeah, in US, yeah, it was like this, which was very convenient. And I would say also you need to be in your career. You need to be careful of your lab, how people are, if they are comprehensive or not. Understand your environment, because, for example, if you are in I mean, I'm not sure I should talk about that. It's not, but if you are in a lab with only men, there will be less understanding that if you are in a lab with different. For example, my wife, she got some. Okay.
That's good.
No, but you have some comment like, when I got my first kid, I was so productive, you can't imagine during that year. It was amazing. You know, where
Experience.
when you're For a wife, it's completely different. You have to recover. You have to recover. It takes so much time. You cannot be that much productive that year. So being in an environment where people are very understanding, understand the process is really also important. So you can be part of your choice if you have the choice.
But I would say that academia is perfect for raising a family because I could set my schedule and be home when I needed to.
Yeah.
Once you have a kid, you're on a 3-hour clock. They get hungry. I mean, my first kid was like 90 minutes, even like in the overnight. You know, it's like no one told you you're gonna be up 90 minutes at a time, you know? So it is intense. And my gosh, that first kid was so hard. So ever since then, the kids just got easier, I think. And we didn't expect to have 3, but we just took it, and each time took more cycles of fertility treatment. But the last cycle on the 3rd, we thought we were going to be done, and then it worked on the final cycle. So thank God for that, because then I would have had 3 boys, and she turned out to be a girl. Gosh.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a question for me, but I know the room, and I think maybe I just want to shoot this to everyone. Any tips on applying and choosing for a postdoc?
I think I'm a really bad person to ask about this. I was joking with Noah earlier. I think I bumbled into my positions. So like,
Could you repeat the question? Sorry, couldn't hear.
Yes. The question was, what advice would you give for applications to postdoc, but probably not just postdoc, like other things.
And you could go back and what about grad school, but I think most of it is in grad school. So.
Well, broad application advice I can probably give. Basically, you probably have done more than you think you've done. I think the best advice I ever received when I have a very similar story to Angela, first gen kid, that didn't know what research was when I first showed up to college, didn't know what coding was either. And so my understanding of a CV was like, you have to have been employed, right? With a W-2 and you've signed your taxes and that could be part of your CV. Like that legitimizes the bullet point. If you've done outreach, if you've done like a little seminar, you've done teaching in courses like this, informally, hosting lab meetings where you teach something, collaborating, going on maybe a summer vacation, but you ended up in a lab somewhere else and you're hanging out with your friend, but you're technically collaborating. All of these things, all of these things are bullet points. But not unjokingly, genuinely, things that you don't think if you really look back on your research career and the things you've done while you're in this kind of situation, there's a lot more things that are applicable and are genuinely valued, I believe, than you might assume. And that if people were scared about why does my CV not compare to someone else's, or why does it look emptier, or why does it look whatever, that's probably because you're underselling yourself. That's something that I learned from my mentors, was that more things should be put on there. It's like I got a random abstract award for a conference and I didn't bother putting it on my CV for 2 years because I was like, oh, cool, $20. And then I was like, but it is something. It's something, right? Put it on anything and everything.
I just want to speak to that, like the CV thing. You know, I've been in this trajectory of academia, and like I'm a research software engineer, but then I've contributed to a lot of open source, but that doesn't mean I'm like, oh, I contributed, cutting edge or like thing that will just blow up in the internet type thing. Maybe a little bit of fixes of documentation, or like, hey, oh, there's this thing that you missed, and whatnot within that realm, right? Those sort of thing I put in my CV. And again, all these sort of like conferences that you've been to, or like little collaboration and thing. Yeah, you put that in your CV, right? And me being a panelist today, I'm going to put that in my CV, right? So like things like this. And then I've helped a lot of hack weeks in the past within eScience Institute, whether I'm just a helper or I actually teach. I put all those in my CV. And now my CV is like super long, within my 10 years, but that's really important, right? Anything that you do matters a lot, and then when it comes time to apply for something, you just like look at this giant thing and be like, okay, what's relevant, what's not. Even things that might not be relevant, you can write it to become, like be relevant, right? In some ways or another, right? I think, and like my wife right now, I mean, I have an 18-month-old right now. And, like we were just talking about, oh yeah, when she goes back to, to work again, You know, like, oh yeah, she's right now taking basically a long maternity leave for like a break for like a whole year. But then we're like thinking, okay, so when you go back to work, there's gonna be a gap. But then you know, motherhood, there's a lot of skills that you're developing. And so like, hey, you know, house manager, right? Things like that. We're gonna put that in her CV, right? Things like that, because you are managing a lot of these things. And you know, she's calling contractors every day to help, you know, like manage the house while I'm at work trying to do this thing. So yeah, like again, I think I cannot stress more on just like really think about the contribution that you've made, and you know, selling yourself. I know it's easy to undersell. So yeah, especially we're all so humble, right? Researchers compared to people in industry, right? Like, oh, no, my shoes. So yeah.
To answer that question too with some more focused ideas, which is to look up the lab really well and try to understand what they're looking for. Sometimes they want an analysis engine. They just want someone to produce a lot of papers from a lot of big data sets that they have. But sometimes they're looking for some more soft skills of someone who's going to be the glue, to be the intermediary in the lab, to manage all the undergrads, grads, and other staff, right? And so if you have good interpersonal skills, play up that. But if you're really strong analytical skills, play up that. But you're never going to know what the lab really wants until you meet them and get a sense of what are the projects and where do my skill sets match those projects. So I would say strategy wise, apply broad, because it's so hard to get a postdoc right now. Try to make your skills sound generalizable. But then once you get to the interview stage, you're interviewing them too. You want to know, do I like these people? Do they seem nice? Where do they go after? If they all have no jobs after, do they get no pubs after? That's another key to tell you how the health of the lab, right? So if you're the first guinea pig, that's a little more risky, but maybe that lab will also be more hands-on with you and give you more focused training. So yeah, I think you got to ask really good questions and try to figure out exactly what projects you'd be working, see if you'd be.
Okay, I think we only have time for like maybe one or two more questions, so apologies some of you didn't ask your questions. I saw you already, so go ahead.
Yeah, this is a question for you know, everyone. How do you stay current in your field, and do you feel that's an active process or an active decision, or is it more a function of your role?
Sorry, I just want to repeat it for Zoom. It was just like, the question was, how do you stay active in your field? And is it sort of like something you do with something, or is it some part of the job that you work? Just make sure they can hear it. Okay. Seeing as how I spoke first. It's hard. Someone said this to me when I was in my PhD, but like your PhD is when you have the most amount of time. The more and more I look back, the more true it is. But basically you just try your best. Like sometimes like I feel very confident in this analysis, let's say, and I don't need to look up a paper, I don't need to look up a tutorial, I can just implement it. But then you come to a decision point. You come to like, okay, wait, hold on. Why am I doing this parameter this way? Why am I doing this analysis this way? And so you go back to the paper and then you read it with fresh eyes and you're like, oh, shoot, this is like from 2011. I have to read up on the follow-up. I have to read up on the follow-up. It sort of happens naturally, I think, in my position anyways, where it's like, when it comes to moments where I have to make real big decisions, like putting something concrete down into a paper, I do tend to do a more big deep dive. And I do have to set aside time. It's not like it's just gonna all of a sudden, like I have 5 papers collected on my paper pile. When am I gonna ever read that if I don't literally block out time to read it? Otherwise, they're just gonna sit there just like every single like for fun fiction book I have at home that I've never read in about 5 years or so, even though I said I would. Right? It's the same exact thing for my work reading as well. As I have to set aside time to do it. So it's sort of that's how you keep up to date. I just sort of also keep track of the date stamp or the year mark on most articles just to see if they're like within the last 5 to 10 years, just to try to keep pace. I will admit though, everything seems to be rapidly speeding up for some unknown reason that everything seems to be coming out even quicker nowadays. So just keep your eye on the ball on that side.
Conferences, I think. Like, if you go to a conference, you will get the vibe of what's going on in your field. And then NIH, what is it, library medicine or study our friend. So if you have a specific thing that's like the thing that you do, and you can't manage looking at all the journals because you're doing your dissertation, you're doing your postdoc work, set some kind of journal search alert that will tell you, oh, here's a paper about the brain area that I am making my career on that's popping up, and that will make sure you don't miss something. Because if you go to the conference and talk to someone who wrote that paper and you didn't know about it, that's embarrassing.
And social media helps too. Twitter used to be good. Now on the blue sky, and you can also similarly, see all the recent papers and preprints.
And along those lines, I'll just say, when I was younger, when I was a baby graduate student, I read a lot of papers and I went to conferences, and that's how I learned things. And nowadays, when I go to conferences, I talk to people who are friends of mine. And I basically went to a program kind of like this when I was around your age, and I would say I've learned more about neuroscience from the people I made friends with at that conference than I have from all the papers I've read, for the most part. Really, academia is a conversation going on between a relatively small amount of people. That's kind of what it is. And so we do it with papers and conferences, but we also just do it in conversation. And so, yeah, being friends with other academics is a great way to do that.
Chime in at one thing. So when you go to conferences, like new people who are doing similar research, I have found that if you follow their blue sky, they'll be talking about the preprints that are coming out from their lab. So you can just follow relevant people on blue sky, I guess, which used to be Twitter, but I think Twitter is just, it is what it is. But yeah, I think that I have found that every academic that do relevant research and I want to learn about, they'll have accounts in blue sky. Other than my PI, she does not have this account.
Or LinkedIn, I noticed more academics are being active on it. But same idea.
Yeah, that also applies, in this sort of industry, since I'm sort of like in this weird gray area of industry academia type thing, and AI is being the pretty much forefront of my learning and my advancement of every day I look at AI news, technology, how it evolves, and then for me personally right now, there's a lot of push in academia of how can we use AI in research, right? That's a lot of where I'm occupying my mind. And yeah, again, a bunch of conferences that I go to, and then just find a couple of communities that you really you want to follow, and then talk to the people within that community again, or follow them in Blue Sky, or I use X for the industry. It's still sort of the Twitter, right? It's not all bad, right? There's as long as you find the right people, it's okay. But if you're just scrolling, doom scrolling, there's a lot of negative stuff. But yeah, again, and also LinkedIn. But I think the key here is just finding that connection, that you truly care about, because those guys are probably gonna be talking to other people, which they get their information from, and then it all funnels to you, which you can really keep up. And that's how I personally been keeping up with the advancements of AI, and then really thinking about how we can apply that in sort of in this field. So yeah.
Yeah, me on my side, I love emails in general, so I have a ton of notification and I skip them a lot. So I subscribe to all major GitHub project, and when there is a release, there is a summary of what they did. I read everything, and when I see an issue that I like, I comment and say why we are doing that, and I get an answer. And so I have a ton. Really, I love too much email, and so I subscribe. Google Scholar, same. I have some people that I like a lot, their research, so I subscribe to them. I receive an email, I skim, and when I see a paper that I like, I go to read. So yeah, me is a lot about email, and I set up a ton of notification, and I try to classify my notification. This is how I stay up to date. But GitHub is really useful.
Something else I'll just throw out there is that some of the people in this room are really good at keeping up with the literature. And some of the people like me, I more identify as methods people who don't really read the literature as well as we should. You can get a lot of mileage out of being a collaborator with someone who's good at what you're not good at. and vice versa. And that is, that I would say that is the secret to me keeping up with the literature. Sure. I think we have time for one more question. If anyone's got a question.
There's a question on Slack, if you want.
Yes, please. Thank you, Ariel.
Yeah, can I do that? The question is, more and more nowadays, the competition for PhD positions is getting harder due to absence of funding, etc. And many candidates have already published before even getting to graduate school. What will be something that will make you stand out and counter that kind of competition? Any advice on like things that you can do, say, beyond the realm of just publishing in order to be competitive in the market, like for a graduate position or let's say just a postdoc, what kinds of things?
Hard
question.
Yeah, clinical psychology PhD programs are getting harder to get into than like even med school. It's I'm sometimes advising some people whose CVs are a little early to just maybe not consider it or pursue other things. For me, I feel like the harassment approach with like multiple emails or reading my papers, just there's like a limit to that being helpful. I think sometimes you just need someone to like show you, like meet you at a conference and like, and that's where like the relationship aspect of this can be really helpful because otherwise it's very hard to distinguish. I don't know. That's a very hard question to answer.
I might, yeah, this is a really hard question to answer. I would just throw out that like over the course of my time in academia, I've witnessed a shift from people going almost straight from PhD into faculty to everyone does postdoc. You can't go straight to, at least not in our field really. It's really hard to go straight to faculty after PhD. And I think the same thing is essentially happening between undergrad and grad school. There's more people vying for fewer spots, and so it's getting more competitive, and so people are lengthening their academic career in order to be competitive in a way that they wouldn't have previously been. And I without commenting on whether that's a good thing or not, I think it is the reality that's happening right now. And so as it has always been in my life, if you want a position in academia, you can be patient. And stick around for a long time and accept the fact that you just won't make as much money for a while, and you can usually land something eventually. But it's not necessarily a really easy run.
From my personal experience, because I worked with a bunch of undergraduates for quite a few number of years now, my observations have been like, if I have to group them up into cohort, some of the students that I've watched go through the lab, when they applied for PhD, I was always like, in my mind, it was like, probably 70-30, like yes, kind of thing. And the quality of that student was maybe not someone I personally would have taken on. Like, let's pretend I was a PI. I might not have said yes to them if I interviewed them, but someone would say yes out there. Like someone out there was perfect for this student, just not me. So I was like, in terms of evaluating their skills and how long they've been around research, at least from the psychology perspective, I was like, okay, cool. Next year, as it gets more competitive, I'm like, okay, 60-40, like, but it's like the same student at that level. I'm like, but the chances of them getting in just feels lower and lower. And this year it was really like, well, to reveal a secret about the psychology department, I believe we only had 3 slots for graduate students this year.
They're all clinical.
And they're all clinical students and no experimental. So there's nobody getting in from that side of things. So that is the reality of the situation. So the pipe and the bottleneck is getting smaller. But what would make them stand out is that I think the students, just like Noah said, that I thought would have like some sort of like a 50-50 toss up. It's just a no. It would have to be, you have to be like at above 80-70%. And in terms of what is valued, it's still experience. And the only way you get experience is just by doing the job. You stick in the lab for longer. You stay as an undergraduate research for longer. You stay as a postbac for longer. You stay in a research coordination position for longer, as a technician for longer. And I think that's just sort of the way it becomes when it becomes that kind of competitive. And I cannot say if that's for good or for worse, but I do think that's the reality of the situation. Like, I think one student I thought was a sure-in, maybe this year, was a pretty they were on the waiting list basically. And they only recently got into a PhD, and that's because that particular professor just got an R1. And that like, if that had not contingently happened during the interview process, I don't think they would have gotten in this year. Of one of the RAs that I mentored. But I was like confident in like a previous year, that was just, they were like guaranteed, no problem, no issue.
Yeah, I think doing a post-bac RA is kind of a given now. The other, I'm curious what panel might think about this. There's also, and this is more grad school to postdoc than postdoc to faculty. There's kind of been a saying that in grad school, your PI or your mentor is kind of important. And then postdoc, it's the institution is a little more important. So kind of what that means is that from coming to grad school to your postdoc, people are going, oh, you work with X. That's great. I'll hire you as a postdoc so they know X. Then when you're on the faculty job market, or potentially a position like NOAA, or eyes market, it's like, oh, you were at MIT for somewhere fancy. And that's also because when you're doing a postdoc, you can morph into a research scientist where you can become more independent, and it's less important who your mentor was. It's kind of more important the institution, and unfortunately, glory goes to those institutions with those reputations, and that does make a difference.
Well, that said, this is all very variable. You look back over 5 years ago, and I'm sure 5 years in the future is going to be very different. And last year, I suspect, was one of the worst years for graduate admissions in the last 20 years or so. And I expect that will change over time. Although I'm not gonna make a bet on how it's going to change next year.
Although a GRFP, if you come in with your own funding, that also changes the calculus for a lot of PIs. So that's the other thing to look at, bringing your own money.
Yeah, that is future.
Yeah.
Are you kind of saying that gap years are not a good idea anymore?
Like
Yeah.
gap or big gap?
Well, what would be a useful gap nowadays?
I mean, okay, this is my hot take. And so this is like a life choice thing too. It's very difficult, I think, and what you guys do to stop in academia, I would say potentially ever, or definitely after postdoc to faculty. So if you want to take a little time to do something else, probably the time to do that is between grad school and postdoc. But I think in general, it's so competitive now, it's very difficult. You're putting yourself at a disadvantage. If you want to end up in a tenure track faculty position, taking time off is the best time to do is being undergrad and grad school. No one really cares about that. Like if you want to do something else, be undergrad and grad school, no one cares. But once you're in grad school to tenure, you unfortunately can't be like, I'm stressed out, I want to peace out for 2 years. That's really hard to come back from. At least that's fine.
Okay, so on that sort of positive note.
Maybe we can do the last question.
A better question.
Yeah.
So clearly the pizza is here. It actually arrived a little early. But before we break here, let's first of all thank our panelists.